Good evening, one and all. We welcome you all to the International Conference on Menstrual Health and Hygiene, Education, Environment, Health, Well-being, and Sustainable Development. 2023, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence, India's G20 presidency, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030 as part of awareness and campaigns. In collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Arts, Sciences and Wellbeing. Before we start our sessions, let's take the blessings of Almighty. In the meanwhile, those who would like to share your experiences or presentations on menstrual talk, on menstrual hygiene or menstrual health, you can share your details, your topic, name, designation, affiliation, your contact number, email address in chat box. So this is a very short notice. We have called for the presentation. So those who are interested can make presentations, and especially for girls and women, because this is a common phenomenon for the male-female counterpart, can share your experiences on, menstrual health and hygiene, so that we can create awareness and also break the stigma, taboo, talking about menstrual health. So this is an open forum. Anyone can share their views, their knowledge or their experiences about menstrual health. So once we finish the commemoration, we will invite you for the presentations, talks, or sharing of your experiences. So everyone who shares will get a certificate about their experiences, and those who participate will get participation certificate. So everything is informal talks, informal, formal, it's not so formal in the sense, because it's an open discussion. Anyone can participate. So let's take the blessings of Almighty, then move on to our proceedings.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue with today's sessions. So while we take up the commemoration, those who would like to share your experiences or presentations or talks on menstrual health and hygiene can leave your details in chat box. Once commemoration is done, we will invite you for your feedback and your observations, your presentations on this topic. So today is a very important day, because half of the population needs to talk about maintain menstrual hygiene. As we know, half of the world's population is female population. And it is also important to achieve sustainable development that the counterpart, that is half of the population, also needs to be healthy and sustainable so that we can achieve sustainable development goals. So as part of the health and hygiene for the female counterpart, today is a very important day as we are commemorating Menstrual Hygiene Day with the theme Making Menstruation a Normal Fact of Life by 2030. Today, millions of women and girls around the world are stigmatized, excluded, and discriminated against simply because they menstruate. It's not acceptable that because of a natural bodily function, women and girls continue to be prevented from getting an education, earning an income, and fully and equally participating in everyday life. Of course, there are various reasons. We'll also look into socio-cultural and religious aspects. And apart from that, there are also certain security aspects that we will discuss it after this commemoration. You can also make points if you'd like to add upon later on. While Menstrual Hygiene Day is on 28th May, and it is a day to break the taboos and end the stigma around the menstruation, raise awareness about the challenges regarding access to menstrual products, education about menstruation and period-friendly sanitation facilities, and also mobilize the funding required for action at a scale. So all these contributes to our overarching goal to build a world where no one is held back because they menstruate by 2030. We also recognize that not everyone who menstruates identifies as a woman, and that not all women menstruate. There are certain exceptions also, where due to various reasons, certain girls and women do not menstruate. Even those are also included. So we are talking about inclusion of everyone, those who menstruate as well as those who do not menstruate as well. So if we are going to succeed in collectively creating a world where periods are a normal fact of life by 2030, commitment to both action and funding must remain high on the menstrual health and hygiene agenda. That's why we are committed, and we will be continued to the overarching theme. And we also have a new approach and various materials focusing on flexibility as well as providing a range of awareness to better represent menstruation and using the bright and bold shade of blood red across the materials, and also the the Mental Health Day logo we see. Hope you all have seen in the brochure, right? That represents the red blood across, which is quite common in this menstrual cycle. So let's look into the various aspects of mental health and hygiene. Today, poor menstrual hygiene caused by lack of education, persisting taboos and stigma, limited access to hygiene, menstrual products, and poor sanitation infrastructure undermines the educational opportunity, health, and overall social status of women and girls around the world. As a result, millions of women and girls are prevented from reaching their full potential. So, Menstrual Hygiene Day is a global advocacy platform that brings together non-profits, government agencies, individuals, the private sector, and the media to promote good menstrual health and hygiene. More specifically, the MH breaks the silence, raises awareness, and changes negative social norms around MHH, and also engages decision makers to increase the political priority and catalyze action for mental health at global, national, local levels. And since its first celebration in 2014, Menstrual Health Day has grown tremendously. Menstrual Hygiene Day was initiated by the German non-profit Wash United in 2013. Wash United is the overall global coordinator of the Menstrual Health Day and acts as its internal secretariat. Wash United roles include coordination of Menstrual Health Day partner network comprising of more than 910 social impact organizations, overall strategy and direction for Menstrual Health Day, creation and dissemination of content of the annual Mental Health Day campaign and ongoing campaigning, external communication, Mental Health Day website, social media and newsletters, and presentation of Mental Health Day at conferences and other sector events. And also strategic partnerships, including with the media and fundraising and monitoring and reporting. So Wash United's role consists of all the above. At Mental Health Day activities in each country are coordinated by local mental health day partners. So their vision by 2030 is it is possible to create a world where no one is held back because they menstruate. This means a world menstruation can be managed safely, hygienically, with confidence and without shame. Everyone can access and afford the menstrual product of their choice. Period stigma is a thing of the past. Everyone has basic information about menstruation, and everyone can access period-friendly water, sanitation, and hygiene facilitates everywhere. However, we are at a crossroads to scale our collective action to end period poverty and stigma by 2030. We need significantly more investment in menstrual health and hygiene now. From Berlin to Mumbai and Kampala to Mexico City, poor menstrual health and hygiene is a global problem. Around the world, millions of women and girls are excluded, stigmatized, and shamed because of their periods. Myths and taboos about periods harms all of us, whether we menstruate or not. So this Sunday, that is today, 28th May, is the Menstrual Hygiene Day, the annual global of awareness and action to create a world where no one is held back because they menstruate by 2030. So the people behind this menstrual health day are Thorsten Kafer, who is the CEO and co-founder of Wash United, a lawyer by training, Thorsten has more than 10 years of experience working on menstrual health and hygiene related issues. Within a Jirga International Coordinator, MHD, Thorsten came up with the initial idea for menstrual hygiene. Thorsten talks about how menstrual health and hygiene is critical for advancing gender equality, the role of men in making menstruation a normal fact of life by 2023, and Menstrual Hygiene Day, including its origin, strategy, collective impact, and how the movement and the campaign has evolved over time. Ina Jurga is the international coordinator of the Menstrual Hygiene Day and thematic lead for menstrual health and hygiene at WASH United, who is another important person behind this day. With 20 years of experience in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector, coordinates a global network of those to 1,000 menstrual health day partner organizations. Ina talks about the global challenges related to menstrual health and hygiene and progress since 2010, both globally and regionally. The original and impact of Mental Health Day and the taxes on menstrual products, including campaigns to end taxes, policy change, and its effectiveness. Menstrual health is also a human rights issue, not just a health one. Each of us has a right to bodily autonomy. The ability to care for your body while menstruating is an essential part of the fundamental freedom. Yet, an estimated 500 people lack access to menstrual products and adequate facilities for the menstrual health. Poor menstrual health and hygiene undercuts fundamental rights, including the right to work and right to education, right to go to school for women and girls and people who menstruate. It worsens social and economic inequalities, insufficient resources to manage menstruation, as well as patterns of exclusion and shame, undermine human dignity, gender inequality, extreme poverty, humanitarian crisis, and harmful traditions can amplify deprivation and stigma. With that in mind, the theme of Menstrual Hygiene Day this year is making menstruation a normal fact of life by 2030. The day is observed as mentioned on 28th day of the 5th month of the year because menstrual cycle averages 28 days in length and the people menstruate an average of 5 days each month. That's why this 28/5 has been chosen. That is 28th day of May is chosen as Menstrual Health Day. There is a wide agreement on what people need for good menstrual health. The essential elements, safe, acceptable, and reliable supplies to manage menstruation, privacy to change materials, facilities to safely and privately wash, and information to make informed choices. Comprehensive approaches that combine education with infrastructure and with products and efforts to tackle stigma are most successful in achieving good menstrual health. Global and national health and development policies should prioritize menstrual health, with investment reflecting the important role it plays in human rights, public health, gender equality, and sustainable development, schools, workplaces, and public institutions should ensure that people can manage menstruation and with comfort and dignity. Targeted policies should seek to eliminate period poverty, in which low-income women and girls struggle to afford menstrual products and have limited access to water and sanitation services. Among initiatives to support mental health and hygiene, UNFPA reaches people who menstruate through education, safe sanitation facilities, including in displacement camps and dignity kits containing essentials like soap, supplies, underwear, and much more. So let's look at few details or information about menstruation and human rights and why it is essential, important for us to discuss. What is menstruation and what is menstrual cycle? As we have seen, 28/5. So let's get into a little bit of details. Menstruation is the process in which the uterus sheds blood and tissue through the vagina. This is a natural and healthy process for girls and women of reproductive age. In Western communities, this is often called the period. It typically lasts 2 to 5 days, but this varies by the individual. So when a person begins to menstruate, this is called the menarche. The age of menarche varies by individual again. So menstruation is part of the menstrual cycle, a cycle of biological changes that takes place in a woman or girl's reproductive system to prepare her body for a potential pregnancy. The changes are triggered by hormones, which are natural chemicals in the body. This cycle begins when a girl reaches puberty and continues until she reaches the end of her fertility, also known as menopause, at which time menstrual cycle ends. So the menstrual cycle is roughly about 28 days long, but it can be shorter or longer. It begins with the menstruation, considered day 1 of the cycle. Menstruation is the shedding of the lining of the uterus and the remnants of the unfertilized egg. It continues with an increase in the hormone estrogen, and the lining of the uterus becomes thick and spongy again, typically in 6 to 8 days. An egg is released from one of the ovaries called ovulation around day 14, but this can also vary. Then the egg moves through the fallopian tube towards the uterus, typically day 15 to 24. If the egg is not fertilized, it will not be implanted in the uterine wall, but instead fall apart. And hormone levels such as estrogens and progesterone will drop. This process is followed by the start of a new cycle. So, while a person's menstrual cycles may be consistent, even predictable, they can also change or vary, particularly in the first few years after menarche. Some changes, such as absence of bleeding, signal a pregnancy. Other changes can be related to contraceptive use, stress, nutrition, or activity, physical activity, or health concerns. Some cycle changes are just a natural part of aging. So now, how is menstruation related to human rights? Human rights are the rights that every human being has by virtue of his or her human dignity. Menstruation is intrinsically related to the human dignity. When people cannot access safe bathing facilities and safe and effective means of managing their menstrual hygiene, they are not able to manage their menstruation with dignity. Menstruation-related teasing, exclusion, and shame also undermine the principle of human dignity. Gender inequality, extreme poverty, humanitarian crisis, and harmful traditions can all turn menstruation into a time of deprivation and stigma, which can undermine their enjoyment of fundamental human rights. This is true for women and girls, as well as for transgender men and non-binary persons who menstruate. Over the lifetime of a person who menstruates, they could easily spend 3 or 8 years menstruating. So during which they face menstruation-related exclusion, neglect, or discrimination. A variety of factors, how people are treated, affect how people are treated during menstruation and other times when they experience vaginal bleeding, and such as during postpartum recovery. There are also exclusions from public life due to various factors. One of these factors is the perception that menstruation is dirty or shameful. This view contributes to the restrictions women and girls face during vaginal bleeding, which exist in many, if not most, countries. Some restrictions are cultural, such as prohibitions of handling food or entering religious spaces, or the requirement that women and girls isolate themselves. And some restrictions are self-imposed. Women or girls may fear participating in activities like school, athletics, or social gatherings. Together, these practices can reinforce the idea that women and girls have less claim to public spaces and that they are less able to participate in public life. And there are also barriers to opportunities. Another common misconception is that women and girls have diminished capacities, whether physical or emotional, due to their menstrual cycles. These ideas can create barriers to opportunities, reinforcing gender inequality. In truth, most women and girls do not have their abilities hindered in any way by menstruation. Barriers to sanitation and health, poverty, and humanitarian crisis can limit women's and girls' access to culturally appropriate, high-quality menstrual supplies and safe private washing facilities. Vulnerable women and girls in the middle and high-income countries can also face poor access to safe bathing facilities and menstrual supplies, including those in impoverished school systems, prisons, and homeless shelters. Heightened vulnerability. The onset of menstruation, called menarche, can undermine girls' human rights. In many places around the world, menarche is believed to be an indication that girls are ready for marriage or sexual activity. This leaves girls vulnerable to a host of abuses, including child marriage and sexual abuse and violence. Deeply impoverished girls have been known to engage in transactional sex to afford menstrual products. So let's look at the universally agreed human rights that can be determined by women's and girls' treatment during menstruation. The right to health. Women and girls may experience negative health consequences when they lack the supplies and facilities to manage their menstrual health. Stigma associated with menstruation can also prevent women and girls from seeking treatment for menstruation-related disorders or pain, adversely affecting their enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health and well-being. The right to education, lack of a safe place or ability to manage menstrual hygiene, as well as lack of medication to treat menstruation-related pain, can all contribute to the higher rates of school absenteeism and poor educational outcomes. Some studies have confirmed that when girls are unable to adequately manage menstruation in school, their school attendance and performance suffer. The right to work, poor access to safe means of managing menstrual hygiene, and lack of medication to treat menstruation-related disorders or pain also limit job opportunities for women and girls. They refrain from taking certain jobs, or they may be forced to forego working hours and wages. Menstruation-related needs such as bathroom breaks may be penalized, leading to unequal working conditions. And women and girls face workplace discrimination related to menstruation taboos. The right to non-discrimination and gender equality. Stigmas and norms related to menstruation can reinforce discriminatory practices. Menstruation-related barriers to school, work, health services, and public activities also perpetuate gender inequalities. The right to water and sanitation. Water and sanitation facilities such as bathing facilities that are private, safe, and culturally acceptable, along with a sufficient, safe, and affordable water supply are basic prerequisites for managing menstrual health management. So health issues particular to women's and girls' bodies, including not only menstruation, but also pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum changes, and menopause, have often been overlooked by decision makers, policy makers, educators, and even medical establishments. As a result, women and girls often know little about the changes they will experience as they advance through life. Many girls learn about menstruation only when they reach puberty, which can be frightening and confusing experience. People of different gender diversities, as well as such as transgender men and non-binary people, often face additional barriers to information and supplies to safely manage menstruation, including possible threats to their safety and well-being. In the last few years, however, menstrual health and hygiene management have become topics of conversation among girls advocates, education experts, humanitarian professionals, human rights, and global development specialists. There is now wide agreement about what is required during menstruation. They must have safe access to clean material to observe or collect menstrual blood, and these items must be acceptable to the individuals who need them. They must be able to change these materials in a safely and privacy, and have a place to dispose of used menstrual supplies or to wash reusable supplies. Menstruating people must also be able to safely and privately wash with soap and water. They should also have basic education about the menstrual cycle and how to manage menstruation without discomfort or fear. People who menstruate should also have access to health information and care, ensuring they are able to make informed choices about how to manage their menstruation and enabling them to seek if they experience menstruation-related disorders. Menstrual products must be also safe, effective, and acceptable to the people who use them. These products may include disposable menstrual pads, also commonly known as sanitary napkins or sanitary towels, reusable menstrual pads, tampons, menstrual cups, and clean absorbent fabrics such as clothes or period underwear. UNFPA distributes menstrual products to women and girls in humanitarian crisis. The choice of product is often determined by the cultural and logistical needs. For example, in certain communities, women are not comfortable with insertable products such as tampons or menstrual cups. In humid or rainy regions, reusable menstrual pads may be difficult to thoroughly dry, possibly contributing to the infection risks. In other conditions, lack of waste management systems might make reusable products more desirable than disposable ones. Lack of access to right menstrual products may lead to greater risk of infection. For example, some studies show that in locations with high humidity, reusable pads may not dry thoroughly, possibly contributing to the infection risks. Other products such as menstrual cups require sterilization and tampons require frequent changing, both of which may present challenges in conditions like humanitarian crisis. In some cases, women and girls do not have access to menstrual products at all. They may resort to rags, leaves, newspaper, or other makeshift items to observe or collect menstrual blood. They may also be prone to leaks, contributing to the shame or embarrassment. One study has suggested that there may be an increased risk of urogenital infections, such as yeast infection, vaginosis, or urinary tract infections, when women and girls are not able to bath and or change or clean their menstrual supplies regularly. However, there is no other causal relationship. However, there is no causal relationships and urogenital infections, and more often caused by internal than external bacteria. Women and girls living in extreme poverty and in humanitarian crisis may be more likely to face these challenges. Women and girls living in extreme poverty and in humanitarian crisis may be more likely to face these challenges. In one Syrian refugee community, for example, health workers reported seeing high levels of such vaginal infections, perhaps a result of poor menstrual hygiene management. However, there is no strong evidence about the risks and prevalence of such infections. Cultural expectations and beliefs can also play a role. Some traditions discourage menstruating people from touching or washing their genitals during menstruation, which might increase their vulnerability to infection and discomfort and could affect their sense of dignity. Menstruation is often different from person to person, and even one person can experience a very different periods over the lifetime. So this is often healthy and normal, but menstruation prevents from engaging in regular activities. Medical attention is required. Unfortunately, lack of attention to and also Unfortunately, lack of attention and education about menstruation means that many girls and women suffer for years without receiving care. One common menstruation-related complaint is dysmenorrhea, also known as menstrual cramps or painful periods. It often represents as pelvic, abdominal, or back pain. In some cases, this pain can be debilitating. Studies show that sometimes menstrual irregularities can indicate serious disorders. For example, some women and girls may experience abnormally heavy or prolonged bleeding called menorrhagia, which could signal a hormonal imbalance or other concerns. Sometimes menstrual irregularities can indicate serious disorders. For example, some women and girls may experience abnormally heavy or prolonged bleeding called menorrhagia, which could signal a hormonal imbalance or other concerns. Excruciating pain or excessive bleeding during menstruation can also indicate reproductive problems such as endometriosis, when the uterine lining grows outside of the uterus, or fibroids, which are lumpy growths in the uterus. So irregular, infrequent, or prolonged periods can also indicate disorders such as irregular, infrequent, or prolonged periods can indicate disorders such as polycystic ovary syndrome. Extremely heavy periods can also increase the risk of iron deficiency, anemia, which can also cause extreme fatigue, weakness, dizziness, and other symptoms. Severe or chronic iron deficiency anemia can also cause dangerous complications during pregnancy as well as physiological problems. So the hormonal change associated the hormonal changes associated with the menstrual cycle can also cause physical and emotional symptoms ranging from soreness, headaches, and muscle pain to anxiety and depression. These symptoms are sometimes considered premenstrual syndrome, PMS, but when severe or disabling, they are sometimes considered as premenstrual dysphoric disorder. There are also conditions that can exacerbate menstruation-related complaints. For example, studies show that female genital mutilation can cause longer and more painful periods. Most people who menstruate experience some physical or emotional discomfort known as premenstrual syndrome, PMS, about a week before or during the first few days of their menstrual periods. PMS manifests differently in different people and may vary between menstrual cycles. The most common symptoms during PMS include changes in appetite, backaches, acne, bloating, headaches, depression, feelings of sadness, tension or anxiety, irritability, sweating, tender breasts, water retention, constipation or diarrhea, trouble concentrating, insomnia, and tiredness. For some, these symptoms can be so severe that they miss work or school, while others are not bothered. On average, women in their 30s are most likely to have PMS. PMS may also increase a person approaches menopause because of the fluctuations in the hormone level. It is not really known why people experience PMS, but researchers believe that it is because of the dramatic drop in estrogen and progesterone that takes place after ovulation. When a woman is not pregnant, PMS symptoms often disappear when on an average, women in their 30s are most likely to have PMS. PMS may also increase as a person approaches menopause because of the fluctuations in hormone levels. It is not really known why people experience PMS. Researchers believe it is because of the dramatic drop in estrogen and progesterone that takes place after ovulation. When a woman is not pregnant, PMS symptoms often disappear when the hormone levels begin to rise again. About half of the women who need relief from PMS also have another health problem, such as depression or anxiety disorders, myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, and bladder pain syndrome. Stereotypes and stigma surrounding the PMS can also contribute to the discrimination. For instance, people may assume that PMS about half of the women have similar health problems, and stereotypes and stigmas surrounding PMS can contribute to the discrimination. For instance, many people assume that PMS affects all women or that it undermines women's competence in school or workplace. So the onset of a menstruation called menarche varies from person to person. It commonly starts between the ages of 10 and 60. In rare cases, menarche can take place before a girl reaches age 7 or 8. Menarche can also be delayed or prevented due to malnutrition, excessive exercise, or medical issues. It is hard to know the global average of menarche because recent and comparable data are hard to find. One study from 1998 found that 14 is the typical age of menarche. Some studies have found that the menarche is occurring earlier among girls in certain places, often in high-income countries and communities. Research from these countries, such as South Africa, suggests that these changes are related to the nutrition and socioeconomic status, meaning that as nutrition and health improve, girls' bodies may mature slightly early. However, lack of systematically collected data and from low-income countries means that broader or global conclusions cannot be made. Similarly, it is difficult to determine the average age at which menstruation ends, known as menopause. Data from 1999 suggest an average age of around 50. Menstrual taboos have existed and still exist in many or most of cultures around the world and throughout the history. Misconceptions about menstruation have led to women's and girls' exclusion from all kinds of roles and settings. Everything from leadership positions to space travel. So menstrual taboos have existed and still exist in many more or most cultures around the world and throughout history. Misconceptions about menstruation have led to women's and girls' exclusion from all kinds of roles and settings, everything from leadership positions to space travel. There are a lot of menstruation myths and taboos, as well as their impact on women and girls. Let's do some myth busting and look at various myths. Menstruation is dirty or dangerous, which is a myth. Menstrual blood, but the fact is the menstrual blood is composed of regular blood and tissue with no special or dangerous properties. Yet, throughout the history, many communities have throughout the mere presence of a menstruating woman would cause harm to plants, food, and livestock. In the 1930s, Western scientists hypothesized that meaning menstruating women bodies produced menotoxins, a kind of poison. In 1930s, Western scientists hypothesized that the menstruating woman's bodies produced menotoxins, a kind of poison. So people continue to hold similar beliefs today. Some communities believe women and girls can spread misfortune or impurity during menstruation or other vaginal bleeding. As a result, they may face restrictions on their day-to-day behavior, including prohibitions on attending religious ceremonies, visiting religious spaces, handling food, or sleeping in the home. In Western Nepal, the tradition of Chaupadi prohibits women and girls from cooking food and compels them to spend the night outside the home, often in a hut or a livestock shed. Similar rules apply to women and girls in parts of India and other countries. In one rural community in Ethiopia, the taboos about vaginal bleeding led not only to women and girls being exiled from the home during menstruation, but also during childbirth and postpartum bleeding. Isolation and expulsion from the home are often dangerous for women and girls and can even be fatal. For example, women and girls in Nepal have been exposed to extreme cold, animal attacks, or even sexual violence. It is important to note that all aspects of these traditions are negative. In some places, limitations on women's and girls' activities give them an opportunity to return their maternal home to relax. So there are various such aspects. So it should not be taken that every religious or cultural practice is negative, it has a negative connotation. Because Because we see those earlier days. Now we have a lot of sanitary napkins and the tampons and various other menstrual cups available, which can safely manage this menstrual blood. But earlier days, girls and women were using different devices and basically a cloth or cotton to manage, to observe the menstrual blood, often by engaging, because nowadays we have all these washing machines, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, and even the other activities are also automated, like even you can operate at the touch of your mobile, because all are interconnected with IoT devices. Because of that, you can safely stay at home or at any place for that matter and effectively manage things without much physical strain and stress activity or higher metabolism. But earlier it was not that. Earlier, men and women were more engaged in agricultural activity and also industrial activity, which really needs a lot of hard work to be performed. So this kind of work, when they are performed, so there is also a possibility of getting more strained, stressed, and also they need to manage their blood, menstrual blood absorptions, and frequently take breaks in between to change and their materials, and which is not possible because they keep traveling and most of them work in open fields and also in factories or open spaces where they do not have adequate facilities. So this also prevents them to be normal, to be carrying their activities without much disturbances. So this is also impacting their health and hygiene because of prolonged utilization of materials. There is often a leakage or infection that happens. So that is also causing a lot of health issues. So not only that, with now the modern days, we have a lot of materials available which can store more blood, which can suck or absorb more blood, and which can also provide various alternatives like menstrual cups, which collects the blood for the entire day or for the part of the day, where without any much difficulty, and you will not even notice any difference. So with this advancement of technology and various aids that has come to rescue, so even the associated factors like smell or the hygiene and other factors are also taken care of, so that people can continue with their normal work. And nowadays it's more of sedimentary work, especially those who are working in sedimentary work facilities. Of course, the same issue still even lies with women and girls working in unorganized sector, especially construction activities or agriculture activities. They still face similar issues. So these all have to be considered. And not only that, especially when these periods are happening, women often face mood swings and they also have certain emotional regulation issues. So they do not want to like to get disturbed much. So, and again, it varies from person to person, individual to individual. So these are the various factors. And other reason also is to manage houses and households. Earlier, it was difficult because most of the uh, homes earlier, if you see in rural livelihoods or rural areas, there was lack of adequate lights and lack of adequate disinfectants and other chemicals which were now available, though which are harmful to us, but still they are able to effectively manage to clean the stains and blood. But earlier days, it was not that flexible. So that's why, to protect the girls and women from shame, from other issues, they are provided with an individual private space where they can go through these periods and come back after the periods so that they can resume back to work. And this provides them opportunity to be out of work and also take rest and also regain so that they can join back to the normal workforce, which is essential also. But nowadays, things are being able to manage with ease, much more ease. So nowadays, people are comfortable even handling these tasks. Another important aspect is because of lot of secretions and lot of cleaning and hygiene involved. No, especially women and girls who are menstruating are not allowed to touch long-term food, especially those which has longer shelf life foods like pickles and all other long shelf life food materials which are stored for a longer period, which can be used for longer period. Because we know what happens when we are not maintaining this hygiene. Often when they are exposed to body fluids or improper, when sanitation is not properly maintained, there is a greater possibility of food also getting exposed and contaminated. So that's another reason where women and girls who are menstruating are told to or kept away from kitchens especially, or from using or touching pickles or any other food grains or food materials which are stored for longer shelf life. Because if it gets exposed to the bacteria or some other thing or some other body fluids or even at times with the blood, there is a greater possibility of food grains getting spoiled. So again, it is an economical loss and food loss for the family. So these are the various things earlier days, because now we have, we are storing in short containers and we stock up in large containers, and we're now we are using so different utensils, and also we have different methods. We have sanitizers to wash our hands, or we have even more access to clothes and napkins and other things. So we clean our hands properly and we sanitize ourselves, and then touch pickles or anything is fine nowadays, because it is no more such a constraint. So many things are there which are purely scientific, and very much valid at that point of time. Because as we see, everything changes with the advancement of technology, and more aids and accessories are being available. Certain things become irrelevant. So, but that is not becoming completely irrelevant, because even in today, rural areas and those who do not have access to these, for them it is still relevant. So we cannot just simply say that these are outdated, or these are simply taboos or stigma. They are there for a reason, because earlier people thought they need to be protected and they need to be given some space, and they need to be provided with some time so that they can go through the process of periods peacefully. But in the process, what happened? Because they are being isolated alone, of course, there are always certain elements in the society. People are not always good. Otherwise, so many things couldn't have happened earlier and even now. Now also it is happening, where, in spite of having so many security measures taken up, people, girls and women are being abused, sexually exploited, abused, harassed, teased. So even that was all, at that time also it was possible. It was happening. It is not a new phenomenon. Even in this modern world, the same thing is happening in spite of so much of awareness, and people still face stigma. And nowadays it is quite common with boys and men also. They are also being sexually exploited and abused. So this was one of the reasons, because women were provided space, and because of lack of security, some elements have exploited, like maybe the family members, extended family, or some strangers have encroached their private spaces, or sometimes molested them or sexually abused them. So this can be possible because lack of security and other things. So because of that, we should not take that as an excuse or as a cause, because today also things are happening. So that may be one of the reasons, but that cannot be the only reason for such things naming as stigma or taboo. But still, wherever we have to see contextually, in that context and based on the facilities available and the region in which, and the culture and traditions, so there might be still relevant. But the more focus is on to analyze the situation scientifically and objective, leaving no scope for such stigma or taboo. And these beliefs also like menstrual stigmas also affect how women and girls are able to manage their health and hygiene. Some of the cultures prohibit women and girls from touching or washing their genitals during menstruation, possibly contributing to infections. In some parts of Afghanistan, it is even believed that washing the body during menstruation can lead to infertility. This again worsens the menstrual hygiene and is prone to more diseases. In other places, women and girls are fearful that their bodies could pollute water sources or toilets. Again, to safeguard secure water sources, women stay away so that the water sources do not get contaminated or spoiled or polluted. So these are the various aspects that are involved. We can't just simply say everyone tries to safeguard themselves and also the environment around them. So we need to understand in totality. We cannot just take one angle of that, one aspect of that, and blame the entire situation. So these beliefs also affect how women and girls dispose of menstrual products. Again, okay, using is one aspect, and the other major aspect is disposing them in an eco-friendly, nature-friendly manner. Often we see, even in cities also, and in various schools and colleges in cities, forget about villages and towns. Even in most cities, we are seeing, especially even when I visited many colleges and universities or schools also, I have observed the sanitary pads are disposed openly. No, and these dogs, cats, and various other animals, they pick them up and they try to mess up with them. So again, this can transmit and spread across the environment. And this may also cause health and hygiene issues, not only to us, but also the animals. So these things are there. We need to take care, and we need to have certain mechanisms to dispose menstrual products safely, securely, and also privately. And at the same time, we need to provide certain infrastructure like incinerators or safe disposal with a closed lids or safe bins to dispose this used menstrual products, so that the municipality or the whoever is collecting it can collect and dispose it safely. Otherwise, it can create a lot of health issues. And not only that, with the evolution of reusable menstrual products like reusable menstrual pads and menstrual cups, which can be reused after sterilization. So these are much better and offer more eco-friendly, nature-friendly practices. And also there is nothing that is disposed. And like you only need certain amount of water where you can wash them, clean them, and dry them and reuse them. So this promotes good, healthy habits and does not also pollute the environment and nature, and also ensures safe disposal of the menstrual materials. In some places, women burn menstrual pads to avoid cursing animals or nature. In other places, burning menstrual products is believed to cause infertility. And some communities believe menstrual products should be buried to avoid attracting evil spirits. Others believe improper disposal of these products can cause a girl to menstruate continuously for life. These are various stigmas and taboos associated, which can be worked out. And there are certain myths, like certain foods are off limits to menstruating women and girls. Of course, there are certain foods that aggravate the mood swings, or the pain or the excess blood flow. So certain foods can be easily avoided so that they can have smooth periods. This is partly true and partly false also. But many communities believe menstruating women and girls cannot eat certain foods, such as sour or cold foods, or those prone to spoilage. In fact, there are no medically recommended restrictions on the kinds of food menstruating people can or should eat, and dietary restrictions can actually put them at risk by limiting their nutrient intake. So they can consume whatever they were consuming as usual, but at the same time, based on their likes and preferences, and now that a lot of nutritional information is available for each product or each food material, so you can use certain food materials which are more comfortable to you and that can help in maintaining your health and hygiene. Another myth is menstruation indicates readiness for marriage and sex. In many places around the world, a girl's first period called menarche is believed to be a sign that she is ready for marriage, sexual activity, and childbirth. This leaves girls vulnerable to a host of abuses, including child marriage, sexual violence or coercion, and early pregnancy. While menstruation is one indication of biological fertility, it does not mean girls have reached a mental, emotional, psychological, or physical maturity. In rare cases, menarche can take place before a girl reaches age of 7 or 8, for example, and even older teens may not be mature enough to make the informed choices about marriage, sexual activity, or motherhood. There is another myth: menstruation limits women's abilities. Menstruation is also commonly believed to limit women's physical or mental abilities. 19th century physicians, for example, believed that periods render it extremely doubtful how far they can be considered responsible beings. Similar ideas persist today. Women may face degrading comments about menstruation affecting their physical or emotional states. They may be excluded from certain roles or positions of leadership. There is another myth: real women menstruate. See, women can also face stigma and mistreatment for not having periods. Those who do not menstruate may be disparaged as not real women. Such perceptions contribute to some women's reluctance to use contraceptive methods that affect their menstrual cycles. And these beliefs can adversely affect women who do not experience regular monthly menstruation, such as women who have irregular cycles and transgender women. These ideas are also harmful to transgender men who menstruate. The men can also face discrimination, limited access to menstruation products, and poor access to safe and private washing facilities. There is also taboo that menstruation should not be discussed publicly. Silence about menstruation can lead to ignorance and neglect, including at the policy level. This leaves women and girls vulnerable to the things like period poverty and discrimination. It is also adversely affects women and girls with heightened vulnerabilities. Those living with HIV can face stigma when seeking sanitation facilities, menstruation supplies, and health care. For example, those in prisons or other forms of detention may be deprived of menstruation supplies. There is another myth: all women are moody when they menstruate. The menstrual cycle is driven by hormonal changes. They have different effect on different people. In some women, moodiness is a side effect of these hormonal changes. Other women do not experience mood changes. So it's all varies from individual to individual. There is another myth associated: menstruation is a woman's issue only. While it is true that menstruation is experienced in the bodies of women and girls, as well as other individuals, such as non-binary and trans persons, Mental health issues are human rights issues, as we already discussed, and therefore of importance to society as a whole. This means that men and boys must be involved in conversations about gender equality and promoting positive masculinities, aiming to eliminate menstruation-associated stigma and discrimination. Let's look at the period poverty. Period poverty describes the struggle many low-income women and girls face while trying to afford menstrual products. The term also refers to the increased economic vulnerability women and girls face due to financial burden posed by menstrual supplies. These include not only menstrual pads and tampons, but also related costs such as pain medication and underwear. Period poverty does not only affect women and girls in developing countries, it also affects women in wealthy and industrialized countries. Difficulty affording menstrual products can cause girls to stay home from school and work, with lasting consequences on their education and economic opportunities. It can also exacerbate existing vulnerabilities, pushing women and girls closer to dangerous coping up mechanisms. Studies in Kenya, for example, have shown that some schools have engaged in transactional sex to pay for menstrual products. And period poverty is not only an economic issue, but a social and political one as well. For instance, some advocates have called for the menstruation products to be taxation exempt. Such efforts in India have resulted in elimination of tax on menstrual pads and tampons. Regular menstruation can be an indication that a woman's reproductive health is on track. So it can help women understand and in a general way monitor their fertility. For instance, many women regard their monthly period as an indication they are not pregnant. This method is not so foolproof, but mostly. However, since every pregnant woman can experience bleeding, such as implantation bleeding, some traditions offer menstruating women and girls a chance to bond with one another. In Rajasthan, India, where menstruation can restrict women's and girls' activities, recently, married women may use it as an opportunity to visit their maternal families, and menstruation can also be an opportunity to take break from regular responsibilities. One girl in Rajasthan, whose name is Poonam, told United Nations FPA that she is happy and she is not expected to help out with the household chores when she is menstruating. So this gives them an opportunity to take time for themselves. So while menstruation has been used throughout the history to exclude women and girls from all kinds of roles and settings, there is really nothing that menstruating people cannot do. They can do exercise, swimming, bathing, work, and sex. All are possible during menstruation. In some cultures, there are restrictions on what people can do during menstruation. But these are customs, beliefs, and traditions and have nothing to do with people's actual abilities. Menstruating women can and have competed in the Olympics, run marathons, traveled to space, held leadership roles, served as judges, and held religious offices. However, the management of menstruation does influence what people can do. Actually, it doesn't hinder the innate abilities, but how they manage the menstruation affects what people can do. And women and girls may prefer going to swimming when they have access to menstrual cups or tampons, for instance, because they are safe and leak-proof when they are used properly. But without that, again, what happens? You cannot go to swimming with sanitary pads. So similarly, the limitations are how they manage the menstruation effectively. And menstrual symptoms can also affect people, what people feel like doing. Again, as we said, we have mood swings, and based on their interest and likes and based on the facilities they have, so they may choose, they may feel like doing something, they may not feel like doing something else. And UNFPA has 4 broad approaches to promoting and improving menstrual health around the world. First, UNFPA reaches women and girls directly with menstrual supplies and safe sanitation facilities in humanitarian emergencies. For example, UNFPA distributes dignity kits which contain possible, disposable, reusable menstrual pads, underwear, soap, and related items. In 2017, 484,000 dignity kits were distributed in 18 countries. UNFPA also helps to improve the safety of toilets and bathing facilities in displacement camps by working with camp officials, distributing flashlights, and installing solar lights. UNFPA also promotes menstrual health information and skills building. For example, some UNFPA programs teaches girls to make reusable menstrual pads. Others raise awareness about menstrual cups. Second, UNFPA works to improve education and information about menstruation and related human rights concerns. Through its youth programs and comprehensive sexuality education efforts, such as the YPEER program, UNFPA helps both boys and girls understand that menstruation is healthy and normal. UNFPA also helps raise awareness that the onset of menstruation, menarche, does not signify a physical or psychological readiness to be married or bear children. The UNFPA UNICEF Global Program to accelerate action to end child marriage, for instance, teaches girls and communities about reproductive health and the harms caused by child marriage. Programs to end female genital mutilation, including the UNFPA UNICEF joint program to eliminate FGM, raise awareness of the negative consequences the practice can have on menstrual health. Third, UNFPA supports national health systems which can promote menstrual health and provide treatment to girls and women suffering from menstrual disorders. This includes promoting adolescent and youth-friendly health services, which can also help girls and young women better understand and care for their bodies. UNFPA also supports the hiring and training of health workers, particularly midwives, who can provide care for the information about menstrual health complaints. UNFPA also procures reproductive health and commodities that can be useful for treating menstruation-related disorders. For instance, hormonal contraceptive methods can be used to treat symptoms of endometriosis and reduce excess menstrual bleeding. Last, UNFPA is helping to gather data and evidence about menstrual health and its contribution to global development. A long overlooked topic of research, for instance, UNFPA-supported surveys provide critical insights into girls' and women's knowledge about their menstrual cycles, health, and access to sanitation facilities. And a recent UNFPA publication provides a critical overview of the menstrual health needs of the women and girls in the Eastern and Southern African region. It is widely believed that intercourse during menstruation cannot result in pregnancy. However, this is not true for women and girls with shorter or irregular menstrual cycles. Non-menstrual vaginal bleeding may also be mistaken for menstruation, which can convey a false sense of security against pregnancy. The only reliable way to prevent pregnancy is to use a modern form of contraception. And no, menstruation itself is not bad for the environment. However, products used to manage menstruation can have a negative impact on the environment depending on the product and the way it is disposed. Menstrual products such as tampons and pads often contain plastics and chemicals that are bad for the environment. The time it takes for them to degrade in a landfill is centuries longer than the lifespan of a woman. So menstrual products can be found in the bodies of water and along shorelines. The manufacturing process to produce menstrual products also has environmental consequences. More environmentally friendly options include reusable menstrual cups as well as reusable and or biodegradable pads. But in many places, alternative methods are not available or culturally acceptable. In all circumstances, the choice of menstrual product must be acceptable to the people using them. For example, some women are not comfortable with the insertable products like menstrual cups in humid environments. Reusable menstrual pads may be difficult to thoroughly dry. Given the potential environmental consequences of disposable menstrual products, it is important to expand the range of methods available to women, allowing them to make informed choices that fit their needs. Though menstrual products are not bad for your health, however, there are possible health impacts to consider. Using of highly absorbent tampons can be associated with toxic shock syndrome, in short known as TSS, a life-threatening condition, but these cases are rare. Frequently changing tampons greatly lowers the risk of TSS. People with sensitive skin may have reactions to the materials used in menstrual products, such as fragrances used in some pads. In addition, many countries do not oblige manufacturers to disclose the ingredients or components of menstrual products, which could lead to women being exposed to unwanted materials. Some tampon brands, for instance, contain chemicals like dioxins. There has been little research to determine the health consequences, if any, caused by the exposure to these chemicals. So communities around the world are feeling the numerous and overlapping effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. These may have significant impacts on some people's ability to manage their menstruation safely and with dignity. Gaps in the provision of water and sanitation services, such as lack of sewerage maintenance or disruption of water supply, will still have a direct impact on the people's ability to manage their menstruation. Stock cuts and supply chain disruption means that the communities could lose access to menstrual pads, tampons, and other menstrual materials. People who may be Gaps in the provision of water and sanitation services, such as lack of sewerage maintenance or distribution of water supply, will have a direct impact on people's ability to manage their menstruation. Stockouts and supply chain disruptions mean that communities could lose access to menstrual pads, tampons, and other menstrual materials. People who may be quarantined because they have either contracted So people who may be quarantined because they have either contracted or come with contact with someone who has contracted COVID-19 may have limited access to menstrual products or running water. Financial stress on families who may be underemployed due to pandemic may lead to households prioritizing other basic needs like food or household bills over menstruation supplies. Increasing prices of menstrual health supplies due to increased demand, panic buying, or disrupted supply chains may leave some without supplies or without the supplies of their choice. Lack of knowledge of one's own menstruation and menarche may contribute to stress and anxiety. The pandemic may limit access to critical information related to menstrual health due to disruption of regular health services, school disclosures, limited access to the technology, and suspension of community-based programming. In times of global crisis, such as this pandemic, it is critical to ensure that menstruating people continue to have access to the facilities, products, and information they need to protect their dignity, health, and well-being. Decision makers must ensure that these essential menstrual health items remain available. But the world is changing how it sees menstruation. Menstruation is increasingly recognized as being a human rights issue. In December 2019, the United Nations General Assembly expressly recognized the neglect of menstrual hygiene management as an issue in schools, workplaces, health centers, and public facilities with negative aspects or effects on gender equality and human rights, including the right to education and right to the employment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Most recently, in July of last year, the first ever resolution on the issue of menstrual hygiene management, human rights and gender equality was adopted by consensus by a United Nations intergovernmental body, the Human Rights Council. This resolution highlights the issue of shame, taboo, stigma, misconceptions, myths, and exclusion that often result from insufficient information, health services, menstrual supplies, and sanitation infrastructure, and calls for the Human Rights Council to take action. Policymakers are also increasingly taking action on the domestic level. 10 years ago, there was relatively little public awareness about the public health, economic, social, and human rights consequences of menstruation stigma. But since 2014, the term period poverty, the increased economic vulnerability that can stem from the cost of menstrual supplies, pain management, and other menstrual-related issues have gained traction in the public consciousness. Today, policymakers are unabashedly addressing these issues in ministries, parliaments, and courtrooms. India, Kenya, and South Africa, for example, have adopted policies and strategies to ensure that adolescents learn about menstruation and menstrual hygiene, to destigmatize the issue and to support access to quality menstrual supplies. Australia, Canada, Germany, India, Ireland, Kenya, and others have reduced or eliminated taxation of menstrual products. And some countries are even instituting paid menstrual leave for those experiencing painful or disabling periods. Quality standards for menstrual products are also being adopted around the world. The taboo and silence surrounding menstruation contributes to the poor knowledge about the role of poor quality menstrual supplies and practices and vulnerability to urogenital infections. But the same is not only the lack of quality research, it is also inconsistency in product standards. In recent years, governments, organizations, and supplies experts have begun to press for improved quality standards. For example, groups like Reproductive Health Supplies, Coalition, and others have developed quality specifications for disposable menstrual pads, reusable menstrual pads, menstrual cups, and tampons. There is also growing awareness that the needs of the menstruating people will not be fully met by the products or supplies. It is just as critical to address harmful social norms, eradicate stigmas, and provide comprehensive sexuality education. Products are simply not enough, advocates and researchers have found. In some settings, for example, providing free menstrual supplies does not improve access because community members are too uncomfortable to even talk about menstruation in the first place. When Kenata Moiskamyo, the little sister of Ogafo in Botswana, started menstruating, she kept it a secret, fearful of being ridiculed. She skipped school. Fortunately, Ogafi knew from her own experience what was going on, and she sat her little sister down to explain that menstruation is nothing to be ashamed of. Then Kenatata began to receive comprehensive sexuality education through a UNFPA youth program. The lessons explained how our body works and also taught her to speak about menstruation and other reproductive health issues without fear or embarrassment. Dispelling misinformation and eliminating shame are critical not only to improving menstrual health, but also to empowering young people to advocate for themselves in all areas of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Now that I understand contraceptives, menstruation, and teenage pregnancy, I proudly share this knowledge with my peers and cousins who are not part of the program. Kanatata, said UNFPA. So UNFPA is working with organizations and partners around the world to improve stigma, free information about sexual and reproductive health, including menstruation, and to empower young people to stand up for their health and rights. Young advocates are driving much of this change. During youth consultations, they noticed that young people are ready to break the taboo around menstruation, said Laura Bass, the new youth ambassador for sexual and reproductive health and rights, gender equality, and bodily autonomy in the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In her work, she speaks that youth leaders from around the world, young people are full of creative ideas to normalize talking about menstruation. Young girls from South Sudan told her that they wanted to create buddy systems at high schools where older girls teach younger girls everything they need to know about menstruation. Other young people such as Vivi Gobosa in South Africa is taking on both the stigmatized issue of menstruation as well as the neglected needs of LGBTQIA+ people, highlighting the menstrual needs of a transgender and non-binary individuals. The African Youth and Adolescent Network, IFRIAN, is launching a number of youth-led efforts to improve information about menstruation, call for better waters and sanitation facilities in schools, and integrate menstrual health and hygiene into crisis planning, and they are not stopping there. As young people, we still commit to pushing more so that more young girls can have access to quality facilities and products and understand their menstrual health so that we can have the Africa that we want, as quoted by Lawrence Cabesley, president of AFRIAN. So with this, I stop here, and we have similar commemoration today. Like World Hunger Day is also being commemorated along with this day, which was created by the non-profit organization called the Hunger Project, seeks to end world hunger. And world hunger is an issue that has been around for a very long time. And hunger is a severe condition where a body lacks food for a long period of time. There are several cases of hunger around the world, including low incomes, drought, famine, and political crisis. According to the organization, about 820 million people are suffering from the terror of chronic hunger. Feeding the hungry is an initiative that everyone can understand and appreciate. Ending world hunger is something we all want. This causes help to save lives and restore hope and dignity to the people when they need it the most. Improvements in food technology have helped reduce hunger around the world. Being able to preserve food for longer helps in maintaining the food supply. One such example is refrigeration. Oliver Evans invented the first refrigeration machine in 1805. Because of the refrigeration, food can be transported for longer distances unspoiled. The refrigerators used to preserve food in home were invented by Fred W. Wolfe in 1930. Ovens also helped. In 1891, the first electric oven was sold in the United States. They were first sold in Britain in 1890. So it is estimated that of the people living in hunger, about 60% are women. And this also seriously impacts on their menstrual health and hygiene. All countries are not equally affected, but almost all countries are being affected with this poverty, with this hunger. Not equally, but about 98% of the people suffering from undernourishment live in low-income countries. And hunger is known to kill more people than any disease, such as AIDS and malaria. We have seen in various days in our commemorations, people are dying with hunger. This is completely preventable. And we are using various other animal agriculture to feed these food grains, which otherwise could be used to feed a lot of people who are dying with hunger. So all these aspects are very much relevant. So we need to be very conscious and aware of the situation around that. Today is also commemorated as International Day of Action on Women's Health, which is also closely relevant to our today's topic, which is also known as International Women's Health Day, which is marked by women and health organizations globally to educate people about women's health and rights, and fights against the social and gender disparities that violate women's rights. It is alarming that these disparities manifest in various ways and operate at multiple levels. These include women's rights to their bodies and to health, as well as to equality and non-discrimination. This day provides women with more information about sexual and reproductive rights and control over reproductive health. Members of the Women Global Network for Reproductive Rights in South Africa met in 1987 and then established International Day of Action for Women's Health. The South African government formally recognized it in 1999. Finally, the establishment of International Women's Day revealed an opportunity to raise awareness of the significance of women's rights to sexual and reproductive health. Sexual and reproductive health and rights education for women, regardless of considerations such as religion and race, age, is critical. International Day of Action for Women's Health highlights the most blatant forms of contempt for autonomy, coercion, discrimination, and violence that many women and girls face in our cultures today. These alone should be enough to motivate everyone to take concrete action. Yet, there is lack of effort to put safeguards in place to avoid perpetuating unhealthy systems. In addition to the people in their immediate environment, the political and economic systems that build on our society plays a significant role in establishing safe places for women and girls. Consequently, it follows the social transformation requires political action to promote equality and mutual respect. In these interpersonal interactions and eradicating violence, women's health can be better ensured by empowering women collectively and as individuals. A key point is addressing the structural factors contributing to their social exclusion and limitations to their ability to make independent decisions for themselves. So women's reproductive health encompasses the right to positive and healthy relationships, health services that are accessible, safe, equitable, access to reliable information, effective and inexpensive means of contraception, and timely support and assistance in connection to unwanted pregnancy. Different life stages correlate to various aspects of female sexual and reproductive health. These include the menstrual cycle, the ability to become pregnant, sexually transmitted infections, and chronic health issues such as polycystic ovary syndrome and the menopausal transition. A healthy sexual and reproductive system is essential for women's holistic health and well-being. The decision-making power is essential for women, including where you may not, including whether or not to have children. Safe sex practices are critical for women's sexual and reproductive health of sexually active women of all ages. Knowledge of sexual and reproductive health helps in preventing unwanted and high-risk pregnancies. Such knowledge, as well as prenatal and postnatal care, saves women's lives and such knowledge as well as prenatal and postnatal care saves women's lives daily. Healthcare for the sex and reproductive organs includes preventing and treating sexually transmitted illnesses like HIV or AIDS. So finally, before I conclude, today is also Amnesty International Day, because we were talking about more of human rights, sexual reproductive health and well-being of women. Today, Amnesty International is continuously working hard to improve the globe. They seek to advocate for human rights and spread understanding of their violations and how our daily choices affect them. This day encourages people to have all nationalities, cultures, and races to participate in a variety of global human rights events. The World Human Rights Organization, Amnesty International, is an active in topics such as war crimes and torture. This organization studies and campaigns to release individuals wrongly imprisoned, prosecute criminals, and fight all forms of abuse. Amnesty International was founded in the British capital of London in July 1961 when Peter Benenson, a British labor lawyer, learnt about two Portuguese students who have been sentenced to 7 years after drinking a glass to liberty. He was inspired to start this group with Eric Baker of the Religious Society of Friends and many other members of intelligentsia, including academics, writers, and lawyers. They wrote an article titled "The Forgotten Prisoners," which was published in the Observer in May 1961 and garnered widespread attention. That resulted in an appeal which swiftly blossomed into an organization dedicated to changing the world and ensuring that everyone has access to the basic set of human rights for all the people. The Human Rights Organization, Amnesty International, which is a worldwide movement with members in more than 150 countries and regions who struggle to put an end to human rights abuses. Although they have a charity arm, grant cash is used to support the organization charity operations of Amnesty International. So this Day is important as it protects all justice for the exploited and the safer world. So with this, I conclude this menstrual hygiene day. So if anyone have any queries, observations, feedback, you can share by raising your hand or using chat box. And those who are willing to make presentations or talk on menstrual health are requested to share your topic, name, designation, organization, along with your contact number and website or feedback form has been raised in the form of polls. We request everyone to quickly attend to the feedback form for session 1. And then those who are interested to present can raise your request through chat box so that we can invite you one by one. Yeah, Mary, you can unmute yourself and you can share your experiences working with the menstrual health and hygiene.
Good evening, sir. I'm Mary Florence from Bangalore and I'm professional counselor and social worker. I thank Sri Holistic Health Foundation and Sri Research Institute Center for Arts and Science, and I could thank Dr. Ravindra sir for giving me the opportunity to express my opinion. Sir, I worked with the village people in Muglur, Anekal Taluk in Karnataka. Actually, there were the group who are doing sanitary napkins. They are doing the they were associated with Whisper Company, and they were supplying, and they did cotton sanitary pads, which is not more infectional, and they supplied with 1 rupee, and in the John Center on the menstrual hygiene month, and the doctors in the community health and medicine lady doctors used to tell how you should keep yourself clean during that 4 days, how you should take bath, and how more than cloth sanitary napkins is used, and how to dispose them. These were the experience. And another thing is uh, when you take when someone is when a lady is pregnant, how if you plan your pregnancy, how you should take contraceptives. If that contraceptives is not taken properly, that might affect the periods. These things I learned are in the community health department. And one more thing, what I want to share is my personal experience. One of my friend, my friend is a heart patient. That girl, she faced the endometric issue, and they did the endometric surgery because that waste blood did not go out through vagina; it went inside, and because of that she faced lot of stomach pain, and she had periods for 10 days, so they did endometric surgery. It is a 3-hour surgery, and now she's fit and fine, sir. This was my experience. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me the opportunity, and I thank Sri Holistic Health Foundation and Sri Research Center for Art, Science and Wellbeing for giving me this wonderful opportunity on the occasion of Mental Hygiene and Health Day. Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you, Mary, for coming forward and sharing your experiences. Anyone else would like to share can unmute themselves and introduce yourself and share your feedback, observations, comments. Okay, then if no one else has anything to share or present, so we shall conclude it here. So you can fill up the overall feedback form, which is mandatory for the certificate. Thank you everyone for joining us on this occasion of Menstrual Hygiene Day. So see you all tomorrow. Take care. Good night. You can join with the same link every day at 6 o'clock, same time with different topics. So take care. Good night.